Hi, everyone. It's Celestina. I'm a life and parenting coach, and I am starting a series of YouTube videos. Today, I wanted to talk about what I'm calling the hypocrisy of big feelings. So, a lot of us are trying to do some version of gentle parenting or respectful parenting or whatever you want to call it. It's not old school. We're trying to do things differently and honor our kids' feelings and treat them with more respect instead of, I believe the term is childism, where you literally treat your kids like second class citizens and, only speak when you're spoken to and spankings and things like that. We're not doing that. However, I just want to acknowledge that this is kind of new ground. We're kind of finding our way here. And one of the places that I see parents getting tripped up is in this area where gentle parenting is not necessarily the same as robotic, always peaceful, always calm parenting. So right away, I noticed a dissonance. We pride ourselves on letting our kids cry and get angry, and we hold all the space for them and we validate their feelings and we stay calm and present with them, which is great. Don't stop. But when our own adult body wants to express in a similar way, they're called big feelings for a reason. They express big. Then we think we failed at gentle parenting and we shame and we judge ourselves so much. And we think we've ruined our kids if we lose our shit at them or, if we raise our voices, God forbid. So I think it's interesting that we're so willing to let our kids have a complete meltdown. But we don't let ourselves do the same thing. And I think that does need to be addressed. I think that's actually a problem because our children aren't just watching us hold space for them, they're watching us hold space for ourselves. So I wanted to just say a few things about that to help us kind of navigate that experience. I think one of the tricks is to not suppress whenever we're having a hard feeling like grief or rage. It's also not about trying to over control our own circumstances or ourselves so we never feel this emotion. Obviously, we can get better at recognizing where we are in our window of tolerance, but that's a topic for another video. I think the trick is really in making friends with this emotion. I really think that we've been socialized and conditioned to just really be scared of grief and anger. And I think it's actually just a neutral human experience. And so I think when we don't fear ourselves, we won't have such an issue worrying about whether kids are afraid of us. And we'll also, as we allow ourselves access to this emotion, we will gain opportunity to practice accessing it and expressing it in a more skillful, less harmful way. So there's kind of three things to working on our own or working with our own adult big feelings. And I do just want to say, I'm going to go ahead and use the term big feelings. I find it's a little problematic in that it's euphemistic. It's just reinforcing that rage, anger, grief, frustration, irritation are bad words and we need to euphemize them instead of just say them. So again, I'm going to use it because it's a nice umbrella term, but I also think it's pointing to the very issue that we're trying to address, which is that as a culture, we have really been taught to fear and suppress these emotions. And what's so interesting, and comes from Jungian analysis. Jung was a famous psychologist. Jung observed that when we take something and we repress it and it goes into the shadow, it doesn't just kind of stay there waiting for us to pick it back up. Once we repress it and once we put it into that taboo place or that shadow place, it actually morphs into a more primal, more volatile form. So I want to just point out that when we bring these emotions out of the shadow, they are not the same anymore. They change shape as when we're initially beginning to deal with them in shadow. So they do actually become less scary, less primal. So that's something that we can look forward to, but we have to lift them out of shadow first and help them kind of transform into that more light-filled expression. Okay, so 3 things to working with our own adult big feelings. 1, allowing both access and expression. And I want to make sure those 2 things are distinct. So we're not suppressing or denying either the feeling itself, that's the access to the feeling. The second part is the expression of the feeling, how it wants to move through us. So that's the second part that we're actually allowing. We can begin to build skill on how we channel that expression, but we still need to let it express. And that can be really scary and tricky because, let me just give you an example. The unskilled expression, let's use anger as an example, might be yelling or even screaming at our kids. First of all, if this is you, please don't cringe. We've all done it. As a parent coach, I've done it. Let's just normalize it. Let's bring it into the light. Let's stop shaming ourselves for it in the secret and in the darkness. You are not alone. Okay, so unskilled expression is screaming at our kids. Here are some examples of how to continue to honor the expression of this emotion, but to do it in a more skillful way, or in, I don't even want to say skillful, but creative way. You could go into another room, cover your mouth with a pillow, and then just completely let loose. Get it all out and then rejoin your kids if you have that option, right? Sometimes we're in public, so I recognize that we don't have that option. Another idea, and these are just ideas, and if you're working with a parenting coach, if you work with me, we definitely dial down this in a very unique way, what works for you. Another idea is to scream, but do it in a really exaggerated, silly way. So kind of channel a cartoon character. You may even get to say some of the things that you are thinking, and please exercise some discernment here. Like, oh my God, you're driving me flipping crazy. But you can just be really playful about it and really ham it up. And I think that takes some of the sting out of it for your kids, but it actually does allow that emotion to metabolize. And then a final idea, and again, these are just ideas. If they resonate, try them out. If they don't, it's on you to keep experimenting till you find something that works for you. You know, you can use your body. You can clench your fists, or you can even clench your whole body and then just release. And then you can do that multiple times if you need to. Again, if it's possible, like if you're at home, this is something that I find really works for me. Putting on some like, not necessarily angry music, but just like energetic music, or like music that does kind of put you in a good mood, and then dance it out or stomp it out. You can even invite your kids to join in. Lastly, sometimes, again, like if you are out in public, or if you're really feeling like you're in a situation where you can't do any sort of expression, no matter how you creatively channel it, you can build capacity to delay expression. So that might look like waiting until your kickboxing class later in the evening. But the key here is you do have to get back in touch with that anger in order to fully release it and metabolize it. So that's another skill to build, because, you know, in the moment we're like, I can't exactly scream or yell or, you know, put on music here. But then we never actually, ironically, kind of reactivate and reopen that anger to fully metabolize it. which is an odd thing to think about. But it does bring me to my next point, which is that the important thing really is to honor the expression. Like, I cannot stress that enough. So every feeling has a natural, kind of primal, even biological way of expressing. Like when we're sad, we cry. And if we get too far away from this natural format, like, I think a lot of people will just try to let their anger dissipate, or they'll try to like turn it into love, or, like with crying, like we can actually teach our body not to cry. We can shut down our tears. But if we get too far away from this natural expression, then we risk the feeling not getting fully metabolized or expressed. And then we may find that we're getting triggered into that particular emotion more often or more easily. Not to use a gross metaphor, but it is kind of like a stool compacting in your bowels. So expressing, and I keep wanting to make the distinction that this is different than just like feeling or accessing the feeling. Expressing feelings fully that have been shunned or made socially unacceptable is actually really hard. This is like a brave new world that we're figuring out. So please know this. The second thing is building curiosity around the emotion and actually building a relationship with the emotion. So this means doing the work of peeling away our own judgment, shame, guilt, fear, self-abandonment, panic, stress around when we feel and express this emotion, right? This is what happens when we accidentally lose it on our kids, or like cry in front of our kids. We can't even fully feel the anger or the sadness because we're immediately layering in all this like, I've screwed my kids up forever. Like, I failed at gentle parenting. I can't do gentle parenting right. So just beginning the work of completely removing that. Yeah, so it really is about, again, to bring these heavier, darker emotions out of shadow, doing the work of letting yourself feel safe in the throes of this emotion, right? Not feeling like this emotion is going to overtake you or kill you or break you or turn you into a monster. And then giving yourself full, honest permission to feel the emotion. Like, again, what I said at the beginning of the video, we are not robots. The goal is not to be calm all the time. I actually want to just throw out there that if you are calm all the time, you are setting your kids up for failure. Because when they turn into adults, when they turn into parents, and they're unable to stay calm, they don't have a model for what to do when they're losing their calm, and they judge themselves so hard. They're like, well, my parents were able to stay calm all the time. Why can't I? So that's just something to think about. Anyways, getting back to number 2, practicing honoring the emotion, practicing just kind of being neutral and curious about the emotion, and then practicing and experimenting with ways of expressing and channeling the emotion. Practicing taking accountability for the emotion and its expression. But honestly, the more that we allow ourselves access to that emotion, the more that we can play with getting more skillful around it. So again, just making a case for not denying and not suppressing. Lastly, and I think this piece is kind of what you all may have been waiting for, what do we do when we lose our shit on our kids? Or what do we do when we've spent half the day crying in front of our kids? How do we like make it okay for our kids, right? Because we're so worried about screwing our kids up. So the last step is to do the work of translation and communication and repair with your children. So anger, sadness, and rage, especially in their raw expression, like in that primal biological expression that I talked about, can be scary and unpleasant. However, I do want to offer the mindset shift. Believe it or not, there are some cultures where you can walk the streets in full-blown weeping grief and be neither censored nor like sanitized, like, oh, let's clean you up, like, dry those tears. So it's important to note that while you yourself, the adult, are building and modeling skill around expressing these emotions, I want to keep calling them darker emotions or shadow emotions. At the same time, you are helping your littles build understanding, neutrality, capacity to be the witness of other people's hard feelings and be more comfortable, like genuinely comfortable, genuinely open, genuinely willing to just witness those feelings without feeling that need to either get out of there, flee, or fix it. Like, oh, stop, it's okay, it's gonna be okay. Like, this emotion's not okay. Like, what do I need to do to make you not feel this? So understand that there is actually a world, there is actually a place, there is actually a way of being where we are not, like, it's not actually inherently natural for humans to be in such distress at these shadow emotions. That's conditioning. So there is a world where this can just be any other emotion on the whole spectrum of emotions. And we can respond to it in just a really neutral, detached, unactivated, undistressed way. So sometimes, and again, like there's a lot of discernment here. I am not a therapist, okay? This is not intended to be therapeutic work. And I also don't know your unique situation. I am assuming that you are just a regular parent, okay? If you genuinely think you have an issue with anger management or depression, that's different. Get some help for that. This is, again, I'm just assuming we're in a place where we're in the range of what is considered just normal or average. So getting back to what I was saying, sometimes we actually project our own discomfort with these shadow emotions onto our kids, and they may actually not have learned. Like, we are teaching them to be uncomfortable with these emotions through what we model. So they may not actually have learned that they have to be uncomfortable with these emotions. So just watch for that. And the other side of that coin is, yes, of course, sometimes we legitimately freak our kids out when we lose it. That's okay. I think of having these big emotions as riding a wave. And it's true that, like, energetically, our kids are kind of in our emotional envelope. So they're going to ride that wave with you. But the more skilled you are at riding that wave, the safer they're going to feel. And they're going to pick up on if you don't feel safe with that emotion. So that's why it's important to do the work of finding your own safety with your own big feelings. Okay, so when you've done big feelings in a big raw way in front of your kids, it's okay. It isn't the end of the world. And so here's my advice for what to do to repair and stabilize the situation. Please do this after you are calm and regulated, but also as immediately as possible. Don't pick up the thread in like 2 weeks. Okay, so address both the emotions and the thoughts your kids may be having. Tell them something like, you were probably scared or uncomfortable. I was acting in a big, scary way, and I'm sorry I scared you. And then ask if they want to talk about any other feelings that came up for them. And then your job here is just to mirror and validate. This is not the time to explain yourself or make excuses or say, well, yes, but. Next, make sure they aren't blaming or guilting themselves. So say, this was not your fault. This wasn't about you. This was about me and my feelings. Next, go over what happened, but again, in a way that doesn't blame your kids. So instead of saying, you made me mad, you might say something like, well, I was starting to feel impatient. And before I could choose something else, I started yelling. So you want to name the emotions that you were feeling. So let's just use anger as an example. I was feeling angry, or I got angry. Then you want to name and take accountability for the reaction that you had. I was feeling angry and I started yelling. And then the last thing, I think maybe you might have heard, there's this idea that when you're apologizing, it's not just enough to say, I'm sorry. Like, you have to say, I'm sorry, but then you also have to indicate that you do plan on changing your behavior moving forward. And I really love that. So a complete apology, going off on a little bit of a tangent here, isn't just like, oh, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm really sorry. And in the future, I will promise to try harder to return the book on time. Or I'm really sorry. And in the future, I will not eat your cake without asking. So, um, yeah. So name a plan moving forward. So an example again might be, next time I'm going to try to notice my impatience earlier so that I have more time to figure out what to do about it. And then lastly, let your kids know that big feelings are absolutely okay to feel for both kids and for adults. They're a normal part of the human experience, right? Emotions are just a big spectrum, and we deserve access to all of them, from the good to the bad to the ugly. That's how we live in our fullness. That's how we live in our whole humanity. Yeah, let them know that part of life is this continuous effort, this continuous dance around working on honoring our feelings, expressing our feelings, and then building skill and creativity. And I want to go more into depth on those things in further videos around doing that in a way that doesn't impact our surroundings and our people overly negatively or overly often. But it's an ongoing process. There literally is no like endpoint where you are just this Dharma cow that never feels or expresses anything. Reassure them that you're okay, right? Like part of the fear around these like shadow emotions is that they're going to take us under. They're going to overwhelm us. They're going to transform us. That's not true. If we ride the wave cleanly, it's a passing feeling. We get over it. So reassure them you're okay. Make sure they're okay. Reassure them that you love them so much, no matter what, no matter how mad you get, no matter how mad they get. Yeah, I think when our kids are little, it's relatively easy. When it's like a 2-year-old having a tantrum, it does make you a little uncomfortable, but I think it's relatively easy to regulate them and yourself as you're reacting to this tantrum. But then as they grow older and they become, just everything gets more complicated as they become, preteens and then teens. They get better at pushing your buttons. It might be harder to hold space for them. So that's why it's so important to practice and learn and gain skill around your adult big feelings. So then you don't leave them hanging without a model or without any kind of guidance for when they eventually become adults themselves or even parents themselves. So we don't want this dissonant cycle to repeat. And that's the cycle of being okay with our kids when they lose it, but not being okay with ourselves when we lose it. That's all I have for you today. I'm a parenting and a life coach. If you want to work with me, I do have spots available. I will leave a link to book a consult if you're interested. And look for future videos where we explore building awareness, building skill, and playing with creativity for how to navigate big feelings in adults. Alrighty.